I'm being challenged at the moment to speak about resurrection life. It seems to me that after Easter it's so easy to let the negatives of the world and the suffering of the world and all the things out there which speak of darkness and deadness to try and stifle that resurrection life which is ours, which we claim, which we know we really have in Jesus, who rose and breathed upon us the power of his Holy Spirit. We need to be living in resurrection life, even in the darkest situations of life. So we're going to read a story about Lazarus and Mary and Martha, a real life situation in which Jesus is challenging them in this situation to find resurrection life. So we're going to work our way through that, and starting at verse 1 of chapter 11 of John's Gospel. Reading the first section down to verse 27, I think it is. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and you are going back?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk in daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when people walk at night that they stumble, for they have no light." After he had said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going to wake him up." The disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." But Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, but for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." And then I've gone on beyond where I should have done, but reading from verses 17 to 27. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had been already in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had gone to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she told him. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who was to come into the world." And I've entitled what I have to say, "Finding Resurrection Life, Reason to Reality." It seems to me that in this real life story, it does reflect real life in the sense that so much of it seems to be unreasonable. The way that Jesus handles this situation, he loves them, yet he delays his coming to them. And life is often like that. Why didn't it work out another way? It just seems so difficult, so unreasonable, but it's true to reality. Jesus says, "I am the resurrection and the life." course, people today are looking for life. They're looking for real life. They're looking for life with a capital L. And we're spoilt for choice if we go by the adverts. You may have been watching the program in which features Angela Rippon, which is a young lady of some 70 years old, I think she is. Just a bit, 71, is it? Just a bit younger than myself, but not many wrinkles. And she's been on this program, How to Stay Young. And I understand you can get anti-aging creams now. You can have things done to you, a tuck here and a nip there. And you can watch your diet, you can take exercise, and you can meditate, and you can be religious in all these things. But in all these things that people seem to be seeking after and following today, there's not much emphasis placed on religion, yes, but not on Christianity, not on the fact that Jesus is the resurrection and the life. That seems to be out of fashion. And of course it always was. And both in the day that Jesus spoke and in today. When you say Jesus is the way, Jesus is the resurrection, then people think, well, we know better. We will sort it out ourselves. And Jesus' claim to fame and fullness is so massive. This claim is really in your face. It's just beyond reason and perhaps too good to be true. Just look at what he says, really. Jesus said, I am the resurrection. And that I am, the hearers of his day would have understood that as saying, in effect, when he says, I am the life, I am the living water, I am the true and living bread, and so on. He's actually saying, in the words of the Old Testament, I am, which was the name for God. And he's saying, I am the resurrection and the life. He's saying, and people challenge that. They did then. How dare he? It's blasphemy. And when we say today, Jesus is the Son of God, people want to question that. Aren't there other ways of finding God? Are there not? How dare Jesus claim to be the one I am? And the resurrection itself was a subject such as it was really a hot potato. How do people understand resurrection and heaven today? Some of the funerals we go to, we don't quite know what to make of them from the Christian perspective. And so, the Sadducees in Jesus' day didn't really believe in the resurrection. And I've heard of some ministers and leaders of churches today that don't really believe in the resurrection, if that's possible. So it needs explaining. And then this life statement, Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. How can he claim to have the life? Surely there must be strings attached. And of course, there are. And the followers of Jesus were far from perfect and didn't appear to be full of life. Anything changed? Are we a recommendation for new life, resurrected life today? People look at us and maybe the advert we give is not one of resurrection life. Nothing much has changed over the years. So in this passage we have a real life situation where Jesus is teaching what resurrection life really does look like in a situation of grief and suffering and trial and confusion and that which is unreasonable but true to reality. How does resurrection life look in such a situation as we've just been reading about with Mary and Martha? Just to remind ourselves of the first bit there, and my first point is that Jesus waited. When he received the news about his friend whom he loved, of the family of sisters that he loved, when he received that news, firstly, Jesus waited. Verses 5 to 6. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister Lazarus, so when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Why? Why should Jesus do that? These are the big why questions. And we have many of them in our lives. Didn't he realize that this is a life or death situation? Did he realize just that the urgency of the message that he'd received from the messenger, whoever it might have been? Your friend is sick. He's dangerously ill. Please come. The emphasis is, please come now. But Jesus decides to stay where he was for 2 more whole days. Why? Why doesn't God answer our prayers with the kind of urgency that we ask them in? Have you ever been there? Have you ever cried out to God, expecting an immediate answer, and he seems to take his time? Of course, we've come to realize, or I've come to realize over the years, and I've been there myself, I've cried out to God for all sorts of situations, and sometimes there's been immediate results, but sometimes God doesn't seem to be listening, or certainly not responding. But I've learned over the years that God's timing is really best. God knows what he's doing, and he's got a master plan that sometimes we can't see. And I've come to realize that you cannot pressurize God. His ways are not our ways. And it's only looking back that you can see his hand of mercy and see things working out for, in fact, the better. The scriptures are literally packed with illustrations of people who had promises made to them by God or by an angel or by the Spirit, whatever it might be. Even back as far as Abraham, he was told he would be the father of many nations, but he didn't have a son. And he was some 100 years old. He'd taken things into his own hands, and Sarah had too by that time. It wasn't going to work out. God's taking too long. God's promises are not being fulfilled. 100 years old. And so it goes on through Joseph in the prison waiting to have his dreams fulfilled. Moses, an old man by the time he started his main ministry of bringing the Jews, the nation of Israel, out of Egypt. And Jesus himself, we could cite that as well. Son of God, yet 30 years old before he started his wonderful ministry. Why? Why does God keep us waiting? Well, God's purposes are being worked out in these delays, I'm quite sure. And those who experience it and have experienced it, we've learned that we actually grow in faith when we're waiting on God. It does have a renewing effect upon us, an edifying effect. And we learn patience. We learn persistence in prayer. And we're drawn nearer to God through these times of testing and waiting. Of that wonderful verse, and I often quote it from Isaiah 40, verse 31, which says, "They who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles." We've been singing about that. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. So draw near to God, wait on him, and know his presence and his power. People are rushing around in this way and that today. They cry out in protest, "What do we want? What do we want? We want a better health service. We want more doctors. We want more teachers. When do we want it? We want it now." God's word says, "Wait on me, know my presence, and see the wonders of my hands in my timing." So Jesus waited. He waited. Why did he wait? Well, because he knew best, as we've just seen. But Jesus waited too because he wanted to draw near to them. He wanted to experience, come alongside them in their time of testing. And that's what he wants to do with us as well. So we pick up on that second point now. Not only did Jesus wait to make this effective in a sense, but Jesus wept. And when he wept with them. So I could read the rest of the story leading up to this, but when you've got time at home, read it in your own time, because Jesus has met up with the other sister Mary in the interim time and had a similar conversation with her. And it reaches the point in verses 33-35 when Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews also, who had come along with her also weeping. He was deeply moved in spirit and troubled, and asked, "Where have you laid him?" "Come and see, Lord," they replied. And so we have that famous verse, really, one of the shortest, if it's not the shortest verse in the whole of the New Testament, which simply says, Jesus wept. And to me that's just saying Jesus came alongside them in their immense suffering, in their grief, in their pain, in their frustration. Where was God? What's happened? Nothing's going to be the same again. Our brother is gone. Help. Nothing can help us now. But Jesus comes. Jesus knew. When he was delaying things, he knew the precise point at which Lazarus had actually died. So he knew. But not only did he know, he knew the right point at which to go and meet with them as individuals. He met with Martha, came alongside Martha. He had a real heart-to-heart talk with Martha. And her faith was somehow encouraged by that talk together, and the same with Mary. And then when he saw all the neighbours and friends and relatives also weeping, he was so moved with compassion, he just came alongside and wept with them. So Jesus' love and concern for everyone was affected, showed himself in Jesus weeping alongside them all. And I think that's true for us in life when we're in the pit of despair, when we're in the place of suffering, when we're in place of bereavement and loss, when things go wrong and we can't understand why, when God seems a long way away. Just remember that he does know what's going on. Not only that, he comes at the right time and he shares the load with us. He laughs with those who laugh. He weeps with those who weep. He longs to be yoked with us, sharing in our suffering, in our pain. And you ask him how much he loves us. How much does he share in that pain and suffering? And of course he says this much. That much. I'm prepared to die with you, for you, to bear the pain and the suffering, and to help you through it. In many cases, Jesus doesn't remove us from the situation. He just helps us, lifts us, encourages our faith, gives us hope, helps us to see beyond and find comfort in him, in that yoked position of being with him. He knows, he feels, he weeps with the suffering of ourselves and across the world, and he sends us out as a church to minister. This is resurrected life. This is the life that people outside the church see. They see a people who are going out to share their food, their bread, their time, their money, their resources with those who are less fortunate. This is love. This is Jesus sharing through you and me. We had the Pope recently going to the holding camps with the refugees and bringing back 2 families because he cared. We have the Archbishop of Canterbury saying how much we should be caring for those who are in need. We must do our part. This is what's distinctive, I think, about Christianity compared with other religions and faiths. We stand for outgoing love to those around us. Not force, but love. And so Jesus comes, Jesus feels, Jesus waited, but Jesus came and wept alongside. He comforts us in our time of need also. Finally, another W, Jesus worked. Jesus worked miracles. And we have this in verses 38 to 44. You might say, well, at last we're getting to the exciting bit of the story. We've heard about Jesus talking to Martha and Mary, encouraging their faith. But now let's get to the exciting bit. Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. So Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odour, for he's been there 4 days." But Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me. But I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." So finally we've got to that exciting bit of the story. Headline news, and it was certainly headline news in that day, and it would be today if a similar thing were to happen. To see this miracle as the main point of the story, I believe, is to miss the main point of the story, is to miss what's gone before. Because Jesus has been teaching Martha and Mary about resurrected life, not at the end, not with the big miracle of raising someone out of a tomb, not the big miracle of when we die and go to heaven, be it early or be it late. That's not the miracle of this story. Wonderful though that miracle is, and I believe in miracles and have seen a number of miracles in my time, and it's wonderful, but God does miracles. That's because he's God. Jesus does heal. Jesus does miracles today through people who pray. But the main point of this story is not that bit at the end. He takes so long. He delays, he waits, he talks. He didn't even hurry up to get to Mary from where he met Martha. He spends all this time. Why? Because the greatest miracle, the more important one, is that people should see his glory in the everyday. Believe that Jesus was sent by God. See the glory of God. We've just been reading it. See the glory of God. Believe that Jesus was sent by God. And confess with Martha, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who was to come into the world. This is the greatest teaching of this passage. Yes, we have resurrection life at the end of life, or if we're sick, we might get raised up early. Be that as it may, God does that sort of thing. But the greatest miracle is that we learn to trust him, walk with him in patience, share Jesus, share our lives with Jesus, know his comforting, know his healing, know his strengthening through the testing times of life, and then serve him in love and serve one another with Christian love. Pray with expectancy. This is the exciting resurrection life and lifestyle that we're called to engage in. This is life. This is Jesus' resurrection life, as we learn to share it and experience it day by day. So we see prayers answered, miracles, yes, but less eye-catching ones as we live one day at a time with Jesus' love and power in our lives, in our veins, in our circumstances, amongst us and our neighbours. I am the resurrection and the life. We are evidence of that as we live in him and he lives in us. So finding resurrection life today and living it as though others see it involves the reality of remembering and recognizing afresh perhaps that this resurrection life is for us to engage in and to claim, not to be cowered into the back of some cave or tomb. Many of us are affected by the darkness of the evil of the world in which we live, and there's no way that we can reason ourselves out of the fact that this world is dark and cramped and bound for so many people today. And it's so easy for us to get into that situation ourselves and to find ourselves cramped and bound in our Christian faith. Well, I believe that Jesus is calling us this morning, each one of us, to come out from that place of disease, disillusionment. We can hear his words to Lazarus, come out. Perhaps he's calling us by name, your name. Come out. Come out from that place where you're cowering. Come out from that place where you're weak and disillusioned, confused. Come out. Trust in Jesus. Walk out. Walk alive. And then he says, take off the grave clothes and let him go. There's work to be done. Let's move around. Let's show people what resurrection life looks like. Come out and let's go in his name. So Jesus loves us, each one. He passionately wants to share our life of testing and suffering, but he wants us to come through that and to live for him in the world where he's put us. And so we have the full text. I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live, even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? I trust that we do believe that Jesus is the resurrection and the life, and that we can meet him and hear his voice calling us this morning. We're going to sing together now, if the band can come back together. Everyone needs compassion. He is mighty to save. Just pray that God's Spirit will speak to each one of us, and we shall recognize where we stand, whether we're standing in that cave, whether we need to come out into a place of freedom, need to be set free, whether we need that freedom in our lives as we serve him today. Everyone needs compassion.